It's that time of year again. The world's top materials researchers, students, and exhibitors are here at the MRS 2022 Fall Meeting. And with that comes new opportunities to learn about all the most exciting topics in materials science. From the brightest minds to the most novel ideas, the only place to get it all is right here on MRS TV.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Duran. Thank you for watching the MRS virtual meeting. You are watching MRS TV.
Applying machine learning to materials data, materials research is very important these days. This field kind of really, came into being about 10 years ago. It's all about learning from data, materials data. So we have a lot of historical data, both experimental and computational. And anybody who's getting started in material science and is looking to do materials design and discovery has to use data science related approaches at this moment. It's just a much faster way of doing design. The Edisonian approach wherein you go and test different materials, until you find success is no longer the best way to go. So it is widely accepted that, these ML data science AI related approaches are seriously the future, are the way to go. Autonomous experiments are the future, and they are built on machine learning and data science. Now that's where this tutorial comes in. So we realize that, a lot of people are using machine learning in material science, but a lot of people are still not. A lot of people, especially students, beginner students, do not quite know, what it is like and how easy it is to pick it up, especially. So what we're trying to do with this tutorial is to give people a basic introduction. Here are the essential concepts. Here is what you need to know, like the nuts and bolts, okay? It's very simple. You don't need to know all the theory behind it. Take these codes, take these scripts, take these notebooks that we have, apply it to your data set. Here are the basic concepts behind it. So anybody, any experimentalist, any computational person, any material scientist can now take it, start using it for their problem. So that is the idea. So I cover essential concepts of, what are the types of machine learning and the methods, specific methods like neural networks or other regression methods that you may apply, classification methods, etc. And then I give a detailed example from my own research, which is on perovskites. So I show people how you can visualize the data and how you can train simple regression models, how you can improve these models, then how you can use these models to discover new materials. In the next part of the tutorial, we cover Gaussian process regression, which is a specific type of regression method, and active learning. After that, we are going to cover neural networks in some detail. Neural networks are their whole field. Neural networks are used everywhere, like self-driving cars are using some sort of neural networks, for example. So it's really a whole day where we are covering a few essential concepts that we think are the most important. It's a very exciting field. If you don't do machine learning, I encourage you to get into it. I encourage you to read many of these review papers that are out there, and it's very interesting.
Joining us now is Dr. Chad Mirkin. Dr. Mirkin, thanks for being with us.
Pleasure to be here.
And first off, congratulations, a big congratulations on being named the 2022 winner of the MRS medal.
Thank you.
It's a big honor. Your award citation reads, for the invention and implementation of nanoparticle megalibraries for materials discovery. So tell us more about this and how it led to this award.
Well, it's kind of an interesting development. Over the last 20 years, we've been developing a whole series of techniques based upon scanning probe instruments that first allowed you to locally pattern on surfaces to make miniaturized electronic circuits. And then we parallelized those types of capabilities and transformed them from single tip type tools to tools that have as many as 11 million tips in a 3-inch silicon wafer size device. And each of those tips now can be used to locally synthesize materials. So in mass, you can make in one experiment more materials than scientists have made cumulatively since the beginning of time. We've taken these tools that were developed as readers, turned them into writers, transformed the writers then into massive synthesis tools where each tip can act like tiny little fingers to do a different chemical synthesis, make a different material at a specific site on a particular chip. That allows you to create encoded chips that have more materials than we've cumulatively made to date. And those materials then are shots on goal for materials that can make a difference in many different applications. So then we screen them in mass, looking for new materials that have either interesting chemical or physical properties that can drive new applications.
So this really has a wide range of applications and also fields that it could affect.
I would humbly say this is about transforming the way we discover and explore new materials, because it dramatically accelerates how fast we can make materials, how fast we can screen materials, how fast we can identify materials that are winners, separating them from losers. And the last part of this is this also represents the most powerful way of collecting big data in the materials discovery space. And that data is really of high value because it can be used to train AI and machine learning algorithms to begin to objectively create machine learning and AI capabilities that allow us to look at all the different possible combinations and narrow down what we should be going after.
I know a lot of people look up to you, so what would be your words of inspiration to them?
Follow what you're most excited and passionate about. Don't pick things because they're fashionable. Don't pick things because you think you should do it because other people. My mother wanted me to be a doctor. That would have been the biggest mistake of my life. A medical doctor.
Right, yeah, I figured as much. So when you go back to the lab, what are you most excited about doing next?
Look, I'm excited every day I go back to the lab because we've got one of the largest research operations in the world, and somebody has always made an interesting observation or discovery that just fires everybody else up. That's the real luxury of being at Northwestern and having a program where you've got some of the smartest people from all over the world converging, bringing their talents to really push the frontiers forward. All of it, to me, is really, really exciting.
All right. Well, Dr. Chad Mirkin, thank you so much for taking the time, and congratulations as well.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
As a kid, I was always interested in light and color. I don't know why. And I asked my mum was a chemist. I said, what subject do you have to study if you want to learn about light and color? And she said, you have to study physics, and it's hard. And I did. I think the sort of the main drivers was just, I find it very, very interesting. And then I've also always been very strongly motivated that if we do science, we should be doing science in order to improve the state of the world for social benefit, for human benefit, for environmental benefit, not just for interest's sake. So when I started working in this field 20 years ago, the best solar cell was probably about 2% efficient. And since then, the efficiency has risen, of the best devices, risen to almost 20%. This is remarkable. At one stage, we didn't think it would reach 10. We didn't think it would reach 15. And now it's just about pushing 20. As I was talking in the lecture today, the thing which compromises the power conversion efficiency of organic solar cells is non-radiative recombinations. A photon has been absorbed in the material and it's generated an electron and hole, and rather than being collected, they recombine, but they recombine through a process that gives out heat rather than a process that gives out a photon. And that is something that in principle can be avoided. And one of the things that we don't really know at the moment is how far it can be avoided in molecular materials, because by their nature, they're soft materials, and there's a coupling between the electronic states and the vibrational modes of the material that helps this non-radiative recombination to occur. If we sort of take a model of the future and you say, I want to have a net zero planet by 2050, and you give it all the resources that we know about, the model will come back and say, you need to install a lot of solar. Currently, we probably produce about maybe 3 or 4% of the world's electricity with solar PV. That's got to go up to probably more than 50%. It depends how much we'll get from wind. It depends how other technologies perform. It could need to be more than that. So I'd say we're an order of magnitude away from where we need to be in terms of solar energy conversion, and we need to get there quite quickly, I would say within a decade or two. In terms of implementation, we need to connect this variable source of electricity with demand. We don't always have the electricity generated at the time or the place where you need it, so we need to transmit it. We also need to store it. So we need all of this infrastructure and associated technologies. We need this sort of electrical engineering and storage technologies. Those are things that can be solved. There's also other things that have got nothing to do with material science, like decisions made by governments, political will, international cooperation. And those things have to be solved at an absolute priority in order to enable the technological solutions, which pretty much they're either there or they're coming along quite rapidly to play their part.
MRS TV is here with someone very important, 2022 MRS President Carolyn Duran. Carolyn, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we spoke to you a year ago when your presidency was just beginning, and now that you're wrapping up this past year, what are some of the advances that MRS has made in this past year?
Thank you for asking that. I think one of the biggest things that I'm most excited about is the coming back to in-person meetings. The second is we got a new editor-in-chief of the JMR, so Ramesh, and having him on board and some of the changes that the whole leadership team with respect to the journals and driving the journals forward as we've established the nice relationship with Springer Nature has been really exciting as well.
And when we talk about MRS, how do you feel that societies like MRS can fill a role with industrial members moving forward?
That's a really good question, and it's something I think that we're still working on and trying to grow. A lot of the membership are students and academics and national labs. We've been brainstorming things like speed mentoring, and if you're coming and deciding whether you want to be in industry or academia, can you learn from junior members of industry? And then that for industry, the benefit is having the researchers here. The cross-disciplinary part of MRS is really compelling. We hire material scientists, but we also hire applied physicists and chemists and all the different things. So I think that's a place where we can really stretch and grow.
So MRS has been around for 49 years. It's about to celebrate 50 years. Can you give us a preview of what's kind of in store for this 50th anniversary?
Yes, we have a lot planned, so I'm super excited. It's just a little younger than me, but coming back to San Francisco after our hiatus in different regions, that's super exciting for us. I'm also really excited about some of the things we're doing, where we're doing batches, like through the years, just to understand and learn. And I've personally been reading up on some of the early days of MRS and how we've changed and grown as a society. The third thing is we've really advanced in our diversity and inclusion efforts. And so you'll see a big focus next year as well as part of the 50th anniversary, just continuing to accelerate, hopefully, the means with which we engage across the world in different demographics.
So building on that, where do you see MRS going in the future, and what advice would you have for the incoming president?
For Sabrina, so enjoy that 50th anniversary for sure, and she is absolutely dedicated to diversity and inclusion, so I know she's going to really provide that focus and help the society move forward. It's one thing. The second thing is understanding and dealing with the in-person and virtual, and how can we, between meetings, continue those dialogues and discussions and collaborations so that it's not a pop in the spring and a pop in the fall, but it's a steady state of learning opportunities for our membership.
All right. Well, Carolyn Duran, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for your service as the MRS president for the past year.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
I think presentation skills are crucial, and I think particularly in a society like the Material Research Society, where there's so many multiple disciplines coming together, people working on these very multidisciplinary projects with people who are different fields, different areas, you have to be able to communicate your work, and you have to be able to understand other people. So the better your communication skills, the more diversity of people you're going to be able to work with. For people who aren't familiar with it, improvisation is this idea that you have two or more people who are going to tell a story in real time. So they don't have any props, they don't have a script, They really have no idea what's going to happen. And so practicing the skills of being able to do that helps you respond quickly in real time. Students often talk about being able to think on their feet. You're more creative, and you also have this idea of positive communication, which is a very fundamental part of improvisation. So this workshop is an adaptation of a class that I lead for graduate students in STEM at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. We'll start with a little bit of a warm-up to get people used to the space. It's a very interactive workshop. I want to get people used to talking out loud, used to me, used to each other. And then we move into one of the fundamental parts of improv, which is this idea of positive communication. We'll practice that in an activity. And then we'll spend the last half of the workshop having the attendees work in small groups to develop an elevator pitch, which is designed to be a short description of their research that sparks additional conversation that they can use throughout the meeting. A success story I can tell you from my class, I had a student in my class who gave a talk for an entrepreneurial conference. And so he went in front of this group. It was the largest audience he'd ever spoken in front of. It was like 300 people. And as he went to start his presentation, his slides cut out. They stopped working. And one of the tenets of improv is being creative and be able to be spontaneous and adjust to the moment. And he was able to do that, he told me, because he had taken the class and he thought about improvisation as he was doing his talk. So he was able to relax and then give a very excellent talk. And he received funding too. Probably not due to the improv, but because his idea was amazing. But I was glad he was able to do that.
So I spent a lot of the first portion of my career in the research lab, and one of the things that I realized as I was finishing up my graduate studies and going into a postdoc is that I really liked looking at the bigger picture of things. What was the impact my research was having, or how could I think longer term about research directions? I happened to find out from a colleague about the opportunity to apply for a Congressional Science and Engineering Fellowship through the Materials Research Society and Optica, and that is an experience where a scientist can go and give policy advice on Capitol Hill. So I had the opportunity to go and work in Congress for a year, and it really gave me the opportunity to see what was beyond the research lab. And even though I didn't stay in Congress longer term, it set me on a path to do something a little more oriented towards the bigger picture. And it's the career path that I think was ultimately the right choice for me. In addition to having a congressional fellowship, I had the opportunity to work at the National Science Foundation. I worked at a nonprofit before I ended up at Berkeley Lab. And I think along the way, there were a lot of different pivots and career decisions I had to make. I had a long-term goal originally of being a professor, and I think learning along the way what different options were outside of staying in academia was really important. My role at Berkeley Lab today allows me to combine a lot of things: my materials research background, my experience with public policy, with communications, and the bigger picture, and I can combine all of those things in the roles that I have today. Diversity, equity, and inclusion in material science is a really important topic. One of the things that I talked about in my talk today was how important it is that we focus on workplace culture. We can go to a lot of effort to recruit more diverse people into our organization, but if we're not welcoming and inclusive of different people, backgrounds, and ideas once they get there, then we're really just going to lose people out of the pipeline. One of the things that I work on at Berkeley Lab as part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts is workplace culture. So we talk about work-life balance, we talk about psychological safety, feeling comfortable to bring up new ideas in our work environment and meetings. We talk about microaggressions and how to be an upstander, to step in when someone might have inadvertently talked over someone or given credit to not the original person who brought up an idea. While some of these things seem small, I think that they are incremental. They are building up over time, and I think making these small improvements are really part of the bigger picture to making sure that we have an inclusive workplace that is welcoming of diversity. One of the things that's been really important to me in my career, especially the last 10 years, has been to be involved with MRS as a volunteer. When I first finished my congressional fellowship, I joined the Government Affairs Committee. I later got involved in our sustainability efforts and have chaired the Focus on Sustainability subcommittee for the last 6 years. For me, it was important to give back to the society, especially after they sponsored the Congressional Fellowship that really changed the path of my career. And it's really been an opportunity for me as well to get to try out leadership skills in a different environment than my day job. I can try out new things, new ways of leading, new ideas, and it's a safe environment. Being in a role that is outside the research lab, I love being able to come to the MRS meeting every year and interact with the material scientists, and it really feels like home.
The Career Advancement Committee is a volunteer member organization within the MRS that's basically focused on promoting the careers of our members across all their different stages.
So we have subcommittees for students, for university chapters, and also broadening participation groups.
Special interest groups, or SIGs, are designed for members who want to engage with the materials research community in a sort of a context that is more specialized to their interests or identities. And there are 6 of them. They are diversity in academia, underrepresented ethnic and racial minority students, that's UREM students. There's researchers of color. There's the awards nominations committee. There's women in material science and engineering, and there's LGBTQ+. And so these are the SIGs that we have at the moment. These are our initial offerings.
The other thing is not one size doesn't fit all. So we can't have a solution that works for one particular special interest groups and that apply to another. So we're in that process of identifying the appropriate programs that would be beneficial for those groups.
So I think what we can look for or hope to see is that the members of the SIGs and their leaders will create events, both in person at the meetings, as well as in between meetings and virtual events, that will allow those interest groups to kind of coordinate activities that support them in all the various ways that you can imagine. And so the hope going forwards is that these groups will sort of evolve to support the community as the community needs. We welcome anyone who's interested to participate in these SIGs. And I want to make sure that people know it's not just individuals who identify as belonging to a particular SIG, so much as individuals who want to support efforts on behalf of that SIG. So you don't have to, for example, be a researcher of color to want to support the efforts of that community. So if you want to join, you can of course email me or Kalpana Kasi, who's the Career Advancement Chair. You can also email Michelle Feeder, who's the headquarters liaison for our group.
Around spring next year, the goals of the SIGs would be to sort of work on some projects and activities and programs. And again, the key thing is they're all going to be different. They're not going to be the same. So that'll be the goal, to sort of identify some very specific targeted plans under each SIG in order to ensure good representation.
We're here with Dr. Samuel Stupp of Northwestern University and the winner of this year's Von Hippel Award. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am very proud to have received this award, deeply honored. I admire greatly who got it in the past, and so I'm extremely pleased and flattered.
So tell us a little bit about your research and how it's applicable to the world.
Well, I'm interested in soft materials. And back in the 1990s, I was working on polymers. At the time, I felt that in order to really revolutionize soft materials for technologies at large, you really needed to go beyond traditional polymers. And this is where the concept of supramolecular materials came from. Basically, that means that you create materials with molecules, yes, of course, but you don't stop at making molecules. You go further and you design molecules to interact with each other in specific ways by non-covalent bonds. So what that does is it makes materials that are much more dynamic than the normal soft matter. This happens to be a great opportunity for biomaterials used in regenerative medicine. We have discovered very recently that we can tune their motions within the material. And tuning those motions allows materials to talk to cells more effectively. By focusing on the ability of materials to signal cells through their motions, we discovered that an unprecedented level of reversal in paralysis after severe trauma was possible. Basically, what we observed is that when motions were tuned to be at a certain level, then the severe injury that caused paralysis basically transformed into the growth of or the regeneration of tissues in the spinal cord, which is very difficult to achieve. In other words, the animal regained function and was able to walk normally after being fully paralyzed. So this is very exciting to observe, that it was a soft material, a self-assembling soft material that is injected as a liquid, then becomes a soft structure in the spinal cord that was able to do that. And that basically is something that we will be able to use in the brain as well, to address stroke and brain injury and neurodegenerative diseases, to create new therapies. And so having soft materials that can actually restore function in the brain, in the spinal cord, is a huge thing. And it is all rooted in designing them molecularly and supramolecularly, meaning that you design them to interact with each other, the molecules, in a certain way, therefore move a certain way, therefore signal cells effectively.
And Dr. Samuel Stupp, you're on the cutting edge of this and the recipient of this year's von Hippel Award. And we thank you so much for talking and sharing all this knowledge with us as well.
Thank you for inviting me to the interview.